welcome everybody. I'm Ron Baker, and welcome to part 2 of my Successful Bookkeeper Summit presentation. And this one is on measure what matters to customers, new key performance indicators for the subscription business model. So if you were at yesterday's session, we gave you an overview of the subscription business model and how and why it's a business model change, not just a financial arrangement. Please, 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 subscription does not mean that your customers pay monthly. It's much, much more than that, as we discussed in yesterday's session. And of course, I'm back here with my co-host on the radio show, thesoulofenterprise.com, Ed Kless. Ed, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure, Ron. This is going to be fun. Love talking about this stuff, and especially this part about the business model and the changes to what you measure. Because as I've heard you say a million times, that's one of the keys to understanding you have a new business model is when the metrics change.
Is when the dashboard internally changes. That's right. Most people get the pricing model changes, but they kind of forget about how the dashboard needs to change. So folks, let's dive right into it. I find this is the best slide to put up for accountants and bookkeepers and financial types, because once you see the P&L of a business, your mind can just track, okay, this is what we're looking at. This is what's important. This is what's being measured. And you can see that the subscription business model is a forward directed income statement, because it starts with annual recurring revenue and it backs out churn. It backs out the number of customers and their revenue that you derive from those customers. And then it categorizes your costs. So just like cost of goods sold would be your direct labor in our world, and you have some G&A, rent, things like that. You might have research and development, CPE, things like that. And then of course you've got sales and marketing, and you'll see why it's classified this way. But notice that it's not trying to match the various costs to various revenues. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday, and I'll explain that a little bit more. But it also adds in new annual recurring revenue. So those customers that you obtained from, within the period of from your last report. And then it ends with the ending annual recurring revenue. So it's very forward directed. The entire subscription business model is a forward revenue directed model. It's kind of like the stock market that way. It's you look into the future. You don't necessarily peer backwards as much as we do with traditional models. And one of the other really nice things about subscription is a lot of the hard lifting, a lot of the hard work has already been done by venture capitalists and private equity companies, because they've been investing in subscription startups for quite a while. So they have a lot of KPIs worked out. So I'm going to give you some of the major ones that you should use, and they all tie back to that P&L I just showed you. So monthly recurring revenue is obviously just annual recurring revenue, divided by 12. The annual contract value is the total value on an annual basis. So normally that's your subscription monthly price times 12, but it could also include one-off projects. And we talked yesterday about how to price one-off projects. And if you use one of those hybrid methods to price one-off projects, then that would go into your annual contract value. Then of course you've got your customer lifetime value, which is probably the most important. And what's really interesting about customer lifetime value is it has to be modeled. It doesn't show up on the income statement. You have to model it. And there are several different formulas. Some of them are contradictory. I'm not going to get into all the details because we just don't have the time. You have to pick the model that works best for you. But then you've got customer acquisition cost, which is just your sales and marketing costs divided by the number of customers that you acquired over a time period, and that shows you how good your spend is on generating these lifetime annuities, as we like to call them. Then of course you've got your churn rate. So how many customers did you lose last month, last year? And then, of course, how much revenue was that you're taking out of the system from those lost customers? And then the venture capitalists use this thing where they look at customer lifetime value and they compare it to 3 times your cost of customer acquisition. So the CAC, the customer acquisition cost. And if they see a 3-to-1 ratio here, in other words, customer lifetime value is 3 times, at least 3 times greater than 3 times your CAC cost, then they consider that to be, very respectable. The best subscription companies have an 8-to-1 ratio of lifetime value to 3 times the cost to acquire. So these are very well tested, empirically verified KPIs. Now, there's more than this. There's a lot of different ways to cut the data on customers. You can put customers into different cohorts depending on the time they joined or if you changed your offering. One of the things people get nervous about with this type of subscription pricing is they think that once they set their tiers or their levels or their packages, that it's done. They can't change it. And that's not true. You can change it as much as you want. You just grandfather the current customers into their old package. Now you may transition them out at some future period or say we're dropping this or that or whatever, but there's a lot of room to experiment. In fact, I think there's a little bit more room to experiment with subscription than other types of pricing models. So these are the most popular KPIs for the subscription. And I'm going to give you some resources at the end that there are a couple of reports done by Andreessen Horowitz, which is the famous venture capitalist, venture capital company here in Northern California. And they have 2 reports, one for startup companies, one for companies that have been in business for 3 or 5 years. And it's the KPIs that they look at before they invest in a subscription business. So, Ed, do you have anything to add to the P&L or the KPIs or the accounting?
Just the importance of this notion, especially that costs of goods sold are future directed. And I think that cannot be overemphasized because when I read it in Teenso's book, that sentence really jumped out at the page to me because it has been something that's been in alignment with what you and I have talked about for years. And that is that prices justify your costs. And it just really reinforces that notion, especially that the costs are going to happen at some point in the future, not in the concurrent time. And I think that's so important. We don't want them to line up. I think we're taking pains and efforts not to line up revenues and costs, which is completely other to a lot of accountants. I mean, I like to think of this, and I'm probably wrong because I'm not an accountant by trade or a bookkeeper, but this is almost like we're tracking what used to be beginning and ending inventory. Or the changes to financial position. The P&L is is morphing a little bit into that as well, which I think is an important point. And lastly, Ron, if you could go to the slide about and talk about the KPIs. And one thing I want to point out, especially if any of you have been listening to Ron and I for a couple of years, when this slide uses the word value, it's really revenue. Ron and I like to say that value is actually what the customer gets. It's the value that the customer is getting. For this, we're just using the standard the descriptions that the industry uses, even though the word value on this slide is not what Ron and I typically mean when we say value, because that's what the customer experiences. It's actually annual contract revenue and customer lifetime revenue, or anticipated customer lifetime revenue. So just to clarify that point.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's always a big problem when you go to write a book, because all the literature, if people are going to research or Google a term and you change it, that's going to be really confusing for them. I learned that when I changed key performance indicator to key predictive indicator. People got all confused. So I've stuck with the typical industry lingo. But at least it's Andreessen and Horowitz, so they have a lot of gravitas. So I'm not going to. But Ed, you made another point earlier, and we talked about this on the yesterday session that we did, that when we talked about MD squared, which is concierge service medicine, and just to show you how important the language is, I didn't even have a good term when I wrote about concierge doctors back in 2000 4 or 5, I think it was, and I called it retainer-based medicine. So I had no clue. Well, we met the bookkeeper for MD Squared at Scaling New Heights, and she came up to us and said, "I'm so glad you said that." She goes, "If you couldn't figure out the business model," she goes, "because I worked for him and I couldn't figure it out." And the point was that she would get a check from a customer, and of course they paid monthly, and she would try and at first code it to various services. Well, what did we do for this patient? Was it an office visit? Was it some type of diagnostic test? She wanted to code it to various revenue. And the CFO kept telling her, "No, they're paying for access to us. It's like, we'll do anything we can for them as long as we're competent to do it, but you can't code it to any revenue. You can't code it to any services." And that just blew her mind. Well, it's not so mind-blowing anymore as subscription is diffused more and more, and we're getting used to just paying to be able to access things like you do with your vacuum cleaner, Ed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, actually, my clean floors is what I get, not just a vacuum cleaner.
That's right. Clean floors.
Changed the bag this morning, by the way.
Okay. So the other thing about these KPIs, when you think about it in terms of, we talked about the AICPA says in its research that it costs the typical accounting firm 11 times more to acquire a new customer than to retain one. Folks, there are a ton of reasons why existing customers or current customers are more profitable than new ones. New ones, you have a learning curve. Your team members don't know the customer yet. They might not know their systems as well. The customer doesn't know you, so they don't know your processes and systems. They're probably a little bit more price sensitive than more longer term customers. I mean, all these factors. And it's so much easier to keep an existing customer. And really, customer loyalty is a big driver of profitability. In some ways, it's as big a driver as pricing is to your profitability, especially in the subscription model, because reducing your churn rate can have a dramatic impact on your firm's bottom line. So it's really important to keep in mind that what you're trying to build here is that customer lifetime value. That's your annuity, not only from a recurring revenue standpoint, but also that's going to be much more valuable when you go to sell. So where the average firm sells for between 1 and maybe 1.25 of gross revenue, we're starting to see subscription businesses sell between 4, 6, 8 times their gross revenue. Now, not all in the accounting space yet, because we haven't had a lot of accounting and bookkeeping firms on subscription that have sold. But the ones that we do know about, and this is where John Warlow comes in, the author of The Automatic Customer. He also wrote another book called Built to Sell, and he's heavily involved with helping companies sell and what they have to do to prepare to sell and all of that. And he says he's seeing incredible multiples come out of businesses that have that recurring revenue. So you've got to factor that into the math of the moment as well. You constantly have to think about building that lifetime customer value. The other thing that we're seeing with subscription, verified in many different places, is if you have a member sign up, a subscriber, a customer, whatever you want to call them, and they stay engaged for a year, then you have probably a 90% probability of keeping them for life. Now look, we're always going to lose customers for various reasons. They die, they go bankrupt, they move, they switch whatever to a different line or business or whatever, they get bought. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons. So churn is a fact of life, no matter what your business model is. But what we have seen is, because churn is right in your income statement, it's on your dashboard, it's on your radar, you're going to pay more attention to it, and you're probably going to be able to reduce it over time. And I love what another top author in the subscription space talks about in her book, The Forever Transaction. This is Robbie Kelman Baxter. She says the forever transaction happens when a customer starts behaving like a member, is committed to your organization, and stops looking at alternatives. And I love that. And that this reminds me too of the old American Express commercials. Membership has its privileges.
Yeah, so that was one of my favorite all time, and I really like this word member as opposed to even customer. But I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that language shift later. If you think of it as member, I think that changes even the mindset of the professional who's developing these different privileges, really for those that they serve.
Yeah, think about being a member of a country club or a tennis club or whatever. It changes the psychology. One of the things that's really hard to convey about the subscription business model is that difference between having a transaction with a company and being subscribed to it. Because when you're subscribed to it, it feels different. It's almost like there's a covenant there. And in order to break that covenant, you have to take some action, like hit the cancel button. And chances are you're not going to do that unless something materially happens, like your finances go bad, or you go bankrupt, or you just get a lousy service experience or something. But think about I constantly think about Amazon Prime, Ed, and just how I couldn't live without it. I mean, it's one touch. I get the stuff the next day, sometimes even the same day. And I just think I have a relationship with Amazon. And here's the funny thing. We are in the people business. Have you ever met anybody from Amazon?
Maybe they're drivers.
Yeah, the drivers, if you're lucky enough to see them. Yeah, it isn't that kind of amazing? I don't even think I've ever spoken to somebody at Amazon. I did once. I had a Kindle issue, but it was somebody in tech, obviously. But th- that's a whole nother topic I find fascinating. That we've got so much trust in Amazon, and we don't associate it with a human.
No, no, and you're right. I think in my 20-year relationship with Amazon, I think I've talked to one person, and it was a technical issue as well.
Yeah. So just find that amazing. So the other thing is when you start looking at the subscription accounting and the KPIs, you realize that churn is a big issue. And we talked to Dr. Paul about this, who we introduced you to yesterday. He's a direct primary care physician out of Detroit. And he's very candid with us and open and honest about his financials. And he said, yeah, he says, my churn rate's running, around 11%, I think it was. And he's done a lot to lower that. Now, in Dr. Paul's case, his churn rate is because sometimes, unfortunately, people pass away. People move out of Detroit. That's been going on for a long time. So he's got to constantly deal with that, or they just can't afford his subscription anymore. But at least it forces you to deal with it and confront it and try and make sure that it's not because of anything in your systems or processes that are complicating the customer experiencing. You want to remove friction. You want to make it simple. You don't want to have the customer to go to the Department of Paperwork when there's scope creep and change orders and all this nonsense. The subscription does away with all of that. Because if you look at the reasons why accountants and bookkeepers lose customers, these are the top reasons. They just don't treat me right is the number one reason. By the way, that's about 67% of the time. We ignore them. We fail to cooperate with them. This is usually the result of ducking and billing, or billing and ducking, or we just don't manage their expectations properly. We let partner contact lapse. So that's a real common one. We don't keep them informed of their stuff. I mean, if you order a Domino's pizza today, you will be constantly informed about where that pizza is as until it arrives at your door. We accountants don't do that. Maybe we should. We assume they are technicians, so we talk in a language that's more accounting or bookkeeping or tax than they can understand. And of course, we use them as training ground as new team members. If you look at these top reasons why we lose customers, notice what's not on there. Technical quality is not on there, and price is not on there. What's all on here is customer experience, customer service. And that's why this idea of plussing, Walt Disney's idea of plussing is so important, because if you can make the customer experience better, we think that is an uncommon offering that can command a higher price. If you turn the coin over and ask why do people select and stay with accountants, you'll see interpersonal skills. This is like the doctor's bedside manner. I mean, we've talked to Dr. Paul, Ed, 4 times, and can't you just tell his bedside manner is awesome?
Absolutely. Yeah. And no question about it. He just exudes that personality.
And that I don't know if you want to call it sympathy or compassion.
Compassion.
Compassion, yeah. He listens to you. It's just a wonderful guy. Also, people stay with us because of aggressiveness. And now this doesn't mean setting up tax havens or whatever, but it does mean that you're looking out for them. You're proactive, just like Dr. Paul is proactive, keeping his patients healthy, and in texting them every now and then, saying, "Hey, is there anything I can do for you?" Or, should you come in and we should talk or something. I mean, that's just that whole, nurturing the relationship, because let's face it, relationships are either strengthening or they're declining. There's not much in the middle. The ability to explain procedures in terms the customer understands. You can tell this language is a big deal. That's why we're going to talk a lot about language in a minute. And then your willingness to give advice. We don't want to nickel and dime the customer for every phone call, for every time they want to see us. We want to make that easy, frictionless, convenient as possible. And then, of course, our perceived honesty, which our profession still scores very highly on. So one of the things this forces you to do beyond those KPIs that we've already showed you, the Andreessen Horowitz KPIs, is coming up with key predictive indicators. And the difference between a predictive indicator and a performance indicator is a predictive indicator can't be pulled from an income statement or a balance sheet. It has to be usually a non-financial measurement or judgment. And I think you'll see what I mean by that. When you think about Dr. Paul, and he wrote this in his book, DPC Startup, Dr. Paul looks at all those KPIs that we have already discussed. He knows his annual recurring revenue, his monthly recurring revenue, he knows his churn rate, he knows his customer lifetime value. He's got a handle on all of that. He's obviously got cloud-based books, he's up to date, all of that. But he's also got another set of predictive indicators that he looks at that are really, I think, important because they are focused on the customer. So he looks at the number of hospitalizations that he's prevented for his patients. He looks at the number of urgent care and ER visits prevented, the patient's weight loss goals being achieved, if that's an issue. Managing patient anxiety or depression is something he pays close attention to. Money saved on procedures, prescription drugs, as well as savings on unnecessary ones not prescribed. Because how many times do we hear about an unneeded diagnostic test, or, and a lot of doctors do it because it's preventative medicine, right? It's defensive decision making. They're doing it so they don't get sued. Dr. Paul's not going to do that. By the way, his malpractice insurance is lower than the typical fee for service general physician who has 2,400 patients. Remember, Dr. Paul's only got somewhere between 550 and 600 patients. And then, of course, he looks at decreased morbidity. Comorbidity is obviously a big issue during COVID, and the mortality rate of his patients. So, but notice what all of these things have in common. They all define the success of Dr. Paul the same way his patients define him. And that's what I love about predictive indicators, Ed, as opposed to performance indicators.
Yes, and the fact that even the people who have influence over these indicators are the people, in this case, Dr. Paul and his team, have direct influence over these things. Look at the key performance indicators of most companies, and about the only team that doesn't have any influence over it is accounting and finance.
Right.
They're the ones who can't touch it. But when you talk about predictive indicators that are customer focused, well, that's when you're going to see that the people, many more people in the organization have influence over it. I think that's a critical point.
Yeah, it is. And so what would be some key predictive indicators for accounting firms? Well, we went on this journey years ago because as we help more and more firms get rid of timesheets, the logical question was, well, we get rid of timesheets, what are we going to replace them with? So that's where the idea of key predictive indicators came up. And I think some of those key predictive indicators that firms without timesheets are using are still very, very applicable in the subscription model. So let me give you a couple of examples. Three of our favorite KPIs, meaning predictive, meaning non-financial, things that you're not going to be able to pull from a financial statement, but that are very, very important to the customer. That's one of the big things about a KPI. A predictive indicator defines success the same way the customer does. So turnaround time. Are you meeting your deadlines to your customer? If you say you're going to get your pizza in 30 minutes, are you delivering it on time? Same with the books, monthly close, financial statements, tax returns, whatever it is that you do you provide the customer with a deadline? And do you stay on time? Just like FedEx measures on-time performance, airlines measure on-time performance, we can do the same thing. We can do it at the firm-wide level. We can do it at the team member level. Another one that we like is HSDs, which is a trademark term, and it stands for high satisfaction days. High satisfaction days. What I love about this one is this is kind of why you became an accountant in the first place. This is one of those days you have where you just pump your fist and you say, yes, this is why I love what I do. Maybe it was a breakthrough on a client. Maybe it was helping the client through a difficult period in their business or personal life, and they sent you a thank you card or maybe a gift. Maybe it was landing a big client that you've been working on for a long time, or getting a favorable outcome on a tax audit. I mean, there's millions of reasons for HSDs, but when you have one, you should let the whole firm should have a vehicle to let everybody know. One firm that I used to work with used to ring a ship's bell that they had in the lobby of the firm, and when that bell rang, and sometimes there were customers in the office, everybody assembled at the receptionist desk, and the person who rang the bell explained the HSD they just had. And sometimes customers would be standing there listening to these stories, and then the guy said it was so cool because what happened over time is the customers started coming into our firm and ringing the bell when they had an HSD in their business. And I thought, how cool is that? That's something I had no idea could happen, but that was really neat. So we really like HSDs, and we have seen empirical evidence. The more HSDs, not only the higher the morale of your team members, but also that you're walking your talk with your customers, but also it's linked to the bottom line, higher profits, the more HSDs you see. And then the last one is the lifetime value of the firm to the customer. Now, we talk about customer lifetime value, which is what is the customer on average, the average customer worth to the firm over their lifetime. This turns the telescope around and says, okay, but what's the lifetime value of the firm to the customer? And this is where Walt Disney's idea of plussing comes in. Constantly innovating. Dr. Paul is constantly adding new diagnostic procedures or new services for his customers. A lot of these docs are doing, 23andMe analysis or genetic testing or other types of diagnostics. Some of them have, CT scanners and things like that, or blood lab work and pharmacology. They're constantly expanding their capabilities under their roof. They may bring in another specialist, a dietitian, a fitness person, a chiropractor. Some of them have, I've read. And when they do this, it doesn't change your price. Now, sure, they go through price increases, and they all make their decisions about how often they're going to increase their prices, whether it's annually or whatever. But it's not tied to services. That way, when they do increase their price, they can always reiterate their value. And I think that's so important these days, Ed, especially with inflation. Everybody's blaming their increase in price on the cost, the inflation, but we think it should be based on value.
No, absolutely. And Amazon, I think, wrote the classic letter, I think it was in February of this year, where they just said, hey, we're raising our price on Amazon Prime, but here's the reasons why. And they gave this litany of hey, well, we've added this service. We've increased your storage on Google Cloud or on Amazon Cloud. all of these different things, I thought was really terrific. You know, Ron, just talking a little bit about the HSD thing, I think that there is another low tech solution that a firm that I worked with put in place, and that is they created an email address, hsd at their domain name.com, and what the person who had the HSD would just bring up that email address, hsd at emailaddress.com, and then what the subject was, and then maybe just a 2 or 3 sentence description, and then that went out to everybody in the firm. But it was also a way for them to measure and count them, because it was the number of emails that was coming into that account. And they actually said that they could, getting to your point of predictive performance, that 3 months later, they always saw a spike in revenue when the number of HSDs went up. It was almost like clockwork that they could see it. And, anybody was saying in business, hey, if I could give you a predictive indicator of future revenue, would you take it? Well, heck yeah, I would, right? And then one example on the notion of plussing, and I think this could pertain to bookkeepers as well as just accountants, but and I'm experiencing this right now. I have a 17-year-old son, a junior in high school. I would love for my accountant to have said to me, hey, what we're going to do is we're going to help you do the financial aid form, and that's part of and there's no increase to your price, but since we have the birth date of your kid and know that he's going to college, maybe we can help you with the financial aid form. Why isn't this something that accountants have been all over? Instead, what they did, Ron, and I'll tell you why I left my accountant, because they sent me the freaking tax planner, the 70-page guide that if I could have filled out the tax planner, I could have done the return. It was just, it was like a key punch for them. It was completely insane. And that's why I left them, because that was not giving, and they thought, what was crazy is they thought they were being helpful.
I know, and that's the opposite of surfacing simplicity. I mean,
Yeah.
We're kind of convinced, folks, that the biggest sin businesses can commit these days is wasting their customers' time. If we do that, I think that's just unbelievable. That's terrible. It's the worst thing we can do today, because people's time is so frazzled and short. We want to make their life simple. That's why we're professionals. We can take care of it. Yeah, it's going to put a little bit more burden on us, but that's going to make their life easy. If we're going to track time, let's track the time that we save our customers, and let's track the time that customers spend with us.
Maybe we should have them fill out a timesheet, Ron.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea. I really do. So yeah, anything else to add on these KPIs or other KPIs? I know, some firms use the Net Promoter Score. And that's pretty popular. Another one that has recently grown up that comes out of Harvard Business Review is the Customer Effort Score. And they go through why they don't like the Net Promoter Score. And then they talk about, measure the effort the customer has to put in dealing with your firm, whether that's digital or in person. Can they always get a person on the line when they need help? And I really do like the customer effort score. So it's just another way to think about customer interaction, customer experience.
Yeah, those two that you mentioned, but just a quick note. I think you did talk about it on turnaround time, but there is a way to do it at multiple levels, as you said, and it can even be by the professional. In fact, one of the reasons why you said we were replacing timesheets is that we wanted to get away from this notion of the efficiency of our people. Well, if you think about a turnaround time, in other words, did they complete a specific set of tasks on or before the date that they said they were going to, is a measurement or I should say a metric of their effectiveness. Right. Did they affect what they were supposed to do? Did they get done what they said they were going to get done by the specific date? And it's a much, much better measure than how many hours did it take you.
Yeah, and that's another reason I like the HSD, because that's also a measure of effectiveness. Mm-hmm. You get an HSD from a customer, thank you, or a hug, or they take you out to dinner or something. I mean, that means you were effective with them, not just efficient. And that's what's really valuable in a personal relationship business. So this brings us to another topic that, I learned this from Walt Disney. Walt Disney changed the language when he opened up Disneyland, at least for theme parks that were called amusement parks at the time. But Walt didn't call Disneyland an amusement park. He called it a theme park. It didn't have rides. It had attractions. and themes and adventures. But it wasn't, in other words, he changed the entire vocabulary. And Warner Earhart used to say that all transformation is linguistic. We want to change our culture. We need to change our conversation. And so the power of words, we're not saying that words can, move rocks or something, but words are incredibly powerful, and they do say something about the culture. Walt Disney, to this day, none of the Disney parks call, they call their customers guests, and their employees are cast members, and they work on stage and backstage and off stage. They're putting on a show. They're selling happiness. That's Disney's outcome. Happiness and memories, I would say. So we've tried to look at how we've tried to change the language in the evolution of business models. So we came up with hourly billing, obviously, and then the shift to value pricing. And now, of course, we're in subscription. But things like, we never did like the word training. So we called it education and value pricing. In subscription, you'd probably call it customer success, because you're really making sure that the customer flourishes and succeeds at whatever it is they're trying to do, whether it's get their kid into college or finance that college since the day the kid was born. I mean, we can help with all of those things. Pricing the customer versus pricing the relationship. We don't like the word discount. We like special trial period now with subscription. You can do like what Fender Play did, give people a trial. Hey, we'll sign you up for our services for a month or 2 months and see, you can test drive it and see if you like interacting with our firm, if you like doing business with us, from client, customer to member. And we'll let you decide if you want to use member in the subscription. But I do think it would be a competitive differentiation if you used member. Revenues and billings. Well, now we're talking more about reoccurring revenue. So the difference between reoccurring revenue and recurring revenue is, with under subscription, recurring is more predictable. It's going to be valued higher by anybody who buys your firm. Reoccurring revenue, even if it's annual compliance work that a lot of us do, is still kind of like a rash. You never know if things are going to come back. If you're billing for a lot of one-off projects or whatever, a lot of those things are just one and done. So reoccurring revenue is a lot more sporadic, and that's why it's not as valued as highly as recurring revenue. And then, of course, with hourly billing, we had change orders, and then we tried to say change requests that could lead to change orders under value pricing. And now we're just talking about, no, it's either covered or not covered. We're no longer talking about scope. And I would say, Ed, decoupling the revenue from the service is the biggest challenge to get our head around in this model.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I think that we talked about earlier about it being future directed is such a crucial understanding and because it really reinforces something that we've talked about for years, but it just made it even more clear. And I love some of these changes that we're talking about here with regard to updating the model. The one thing I think might add to the slide is something that we talked about earlier or on yesterday, is changing the notion of what we used to call a service guarantee to the cancel button. That really becomes your guarantee. Hey, listen, try us out. If it doesn't work, you can cancel. We can cancel. But it ups the game. And you're so right, Ron, this notion of plussing and constantly adding new things to the market, which is why it's recurring transformations. That's what has to happen.
Yeah. And we also, obviously in hourly billing, you worry about time capacity because that's what you're trying to leverage. And that's how we got the pyramid model of most firms. But now, when we went to value pricing, we talked about adaptive capacity. Your firm is more like a Boeing 777 or something, and you get to figure out how many people sit in first class and business class. But now we're talking about emotional capacity. We're talking about that ability to always have capacity to take care of your customers, just like Dr. Paul, since he's only got 550 patients, he's got time to text them. He's got time to talk to them on the phone and email with them and spend an hour with them in an appointment, where you don't have that if you have 2,400 patients. There's just no way that you can develop and cultivate and nurture long-term relationships with that many people. It's insane. So that emotional capacity is really important. Not how many customers can you physically handle, because it's probably a lot more than we think. But what about the emotional capacity? I mean, we burn out, we have to recharge, we have to constantly, um, you know, educate ourselves and technical updates just to keep up with, different regulations, tax, if you do that. Uh, and also just to recharge your batteries and also to work on your business and innovate new products and services and test new things. That all takes time, and you can't do that if we're constantly on this treadmill of going from one job to another, one service to another. This is just a different pace of life, I think, which is why I love this model. And then, of course, we go from utilization and realization, and we just go to customer lifetime value, and of course, accountability. I think is a big part, because since the relationship is at the center of the business, we're accountable now to that customer. Whatever they need, we try and help them do it. And if we can't do it, then maybe there's somebody within our social network or our social capital. We have experts lined up. You might have bankers, insurance people, lawyers that you can refer to, or even other accountants that specialize in an area that you can't do, like trusts or estates or something that's more complex. Just make sure that you quarterback the relationship, just like when Dr. Paul has to send one of his patients to a specialist. A lot of the time he goes with them and sits in on that appointment with the orthopedic surgeon or the cardiac surgeon or whatever, because like the DPCs love to say, they're there to get the patient the care they need at the time they need it in a safe manner. So they use the analogy of train conductors, which I really like, which is getting the passengers to where they need to go safely when they need to go. So these are all ways that we think that if you use this new language, just like Walt Disney, you can really put a mark on the culture. And really, it's much easier to differentiate your firm when you speak in a language that, even if you have to explain it to the guy. I can remember, Ed, the first time that we used the term customer instead of client when we were talking with bankers or insurance people, and they'd say, whoa, wait a minute, don't you have clients? And that just led to the most interesting discussion ever.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and can I give you one more reason to listen to Werner Erhard? He beat the IRS in a tax case, Ron.
That's right. He did, didn't he? And Ed, you've got a great blog post about the difference, the etymology between client and customer.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's on the, what is it, edclus.com?
Edclus.com, yeah. Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
just Google client versus customer EdClus, because you're the only EdClus in the world. So
That's right.
it'll come right up. And it is a great post. It is a great post. And it explains definitively why we prefer customer over client. The other thing, folks, and this is kind of tongue in cheek, but one of our listeners, one of our Patreon members sent us this. Just, I don't know where he found it on the web, Ed, but it's it kind of related to dating. It was kind of like a date versus a romance or a marriage or something. And yeah, I present this to you tongue in cheek. I'm not going to go through it. I think it's self-explanatory, but I'll tell you, there's a nugget of wisdom in this as well. I don't like the comparison of a professional customer relationship. Some people call it like a marriage. Well, it's not a marriage. And let's be honest, it's a professional relationship. And in a marriage, it's kind of 50-50. But in a professional relationship, the onus is on us. The onus is on us to nurture that relationship and keep it going and to help our customers flourish. So the analogy is not perfect, but I'll tell you, there's still a lot of truth from a psychological standpoint, with this list. I mean, I love the main goal is to prevail, whereas in a relationship, the main goal is to preserve the relationship. I mean, how many firms have you seen, Ed, that are kind of like they're so busy selling transactions or let's land that project, and then they do it and it's one and done and they never see that customer again? That's just not what subscription is about. Subscription is more about lifelong relationships. So I just wanted to share that with you. And as we showed you yesterday, these are the additional resources that we highly recommend. Subscribe, the book by Teenzo, The Automatic Customer by John Warlow, Subscription Marketing by Ann Janzer. Robbie Kelman Baxter is not on this list, but she wrote The Forever Transaction. That's another good book to read. And we've also interviewed each one of those authors, so you can listen to that on our show. I'll show you how to do that. And also, you can subscribe to Teen Zoe's Subscription Economy Index at Zora.com. Teen also has a weekly newsletter that he writes, and it's always interesting. Ed and I are constantly talking about topics that he brings up, and that's a really good thing to subscribe to. And also, you can get the Andreessen Horowitz reports on the KPIs and what they look at to determine how to value a subscription business at those links. So we'll make sure that you have access to the PDFs of these decks, and you can get these reports. And then if you want to listen to what Ed and I have done on subscription, go to the Soul of Enterprise. On the homepage, we have a tab called Show Categories. If you pull that down and you tap on Subscription Model, you'll get every show that we've ever done on subscription, including the 4 authors that we just discussed, including talking to CPAs and lawyers who use the subscription model, the 4 shows that we've done with Dr. Paul Thomas, so you can hear how he's flourishing under this model. And also Ed and I have just done, I don't know what, Ed, 12 shows or so, or maybe more, on a particular aspect of subscription and how we think it applies to professional firms, because we're on a learning curve here, and we're learning as much as the people that are doing it are.
No, absolutely. Invite you to join that for sure.
And then if you want to get a hold of me, sorry I don't have that up here, but if you want to get a hold of me, you can find me on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. You can email me. I'm happy to continue the conversation, and I'll let Ed do our special announcement.
Yes, well, because Ron has a new book coming out called Time's Up, which is about the subscription business model for professionals. And if you want to join the pre-order club, which is the book will come out in December of 2022, you can join that by going to thesoulofenterprise.com/timesup. You need to purchase the book on Amazon and then send us a copy of the receipt so that we have it. And then you'll be able to come in and join that club. You get access to the Soul of Enterprise commercial free, as well as our bonus episodes that we do, as well as conversations that I'm going to be having both with Ron and his co-author, Paul Dunn. And then also we're going to do audio summaries, not having Ron read the book to you, but audio summaries of each chapter in the book. So that'll be available only to those folks who are members of the pre-order club. So join today.
Yeah, and like Ed said, folks, that book is coming out December 8th. That is the USA release date. I believe the release date in the rest of the world, at least off of Amazon, is going to be January. They're telling me the 31st. I haven't confirmed that, but that's the date I see on some of the Amazon sites around the world. So if you're in Australia, it's probably going to be in January, unless you order it from United States Amazon, and it'll also be available on Kindle as well. So, well, folks, I hope we've given you enough food for thought to at least consider the subscription economy, maybe to learn more about it by listening to some of our episodes that we've done on it. Certainly pick up some of the books. If you're only going to read one book as a result, I would read Teen Zoe's, at least until mine comes out, because Subscribed is what really got us excited about this model. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the Successful Bookkeeper Summit. Thank you for attending my sessions, and have a great day.